So I'm asking people, would you like to protect free speech or prosecute hate speech?
This is the wrong question. Algorithms, media, things like that, and who controls what we see and who controls the conversation online. Yeah, but who decides what pops up on my feed?
Well, your algorithm does.
Exactly, and who programmed that algorithm?
You did.
If you watch my channel, I'm pretty sure you know how I feel about free speech.
I'd need to listen to some thoughtful legal experts.
Would you give yourself the power?
No.
You wouldn't trust yourself
No.
with the power to determine what hate speech is?
No.
Oh, this one is zesty. And if you like finding out who voted for or against new laws like the new hate crimes bill that just passed, then subscribe to this channel. It tells me I'm doing something right. Let's get on with it. When you think of a free country, you think equal rights, democracy, voting, free speech. What? Even though Australia ranks 7th on the Cato Freedom Index, we don't have free speech.
I always grew up thinking we had free speech, and then when I got a bit older, I realised, it's not even close.
That's right. The linchpin of a democracy is free speech, and while Australia has never truly had free speech protections, Australia has just stepped into dark authoritarian territory under the auspices of kindness by passing hate crimes bill. Yeah, so under these new laws, it's now illegal to threaten force or violence against someone who is a part of one of these protected groups, or an ally or associate of one of these protected groups. Now, I'm not a big fan of threats, but the problem is the way that threats are redefined and the incredibly low bar for what now constitutes a threat. And here's the perfect parallel of how the hate crimes bill and criminal code will be stretched and applied depending on whether authorities like your message or not.
My prohibited activity is that I'm obstructing or unreasonably disturbing any person lawfully using a mall. I have absolutely done no such thing. I was standing quietly.
You should get a fucking job and, move on with your life,
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Example of
I have
that
not
obstruct
done this.
users of the mall. This is because you're in this area.
So this guy that just came up to harass me, he's using that as an example of me obstructing people. That man came up to me to harass me. He's citing that as an example of me obstructing someone. Did that look like obstruction to you when that man came up to harass me?
You are obstructing people, okay? So at this
How am I obstructing people?
It's been explained to you, okay?
So that's Billboard Chris. He's got a controversial message written on his chest. He wasn't obstructing anybody, but the authorities can stretch this law and apply it to him. They know that it won't stick, but the trial is part of the punishment, so they win in the end. But this bill, the hate crimes bill that amends the criminal code, it's the oppression Olympics in legal form, as it's impossible to be a human being and not fall into at least 3 of these categories. So I spent hours and hours arguing with ChatGPT and Grok to figure out exactly how these laws have changed and the impact that they're going to have. And I hit the streets to ask people to vote whether to protect free speech or prosecute hate speech, because you can't do both.
Support free speech or...
free speech always.
Free speech always? Free speech? Hey, you got one for hate speech. Do you think there should be any limitations on free speech? Should there be any limits on free speech?
No.
No?
No. What is it about people where they're so sensitive that their whole life stops when they hear something they don't like?
So how would you define hate speech?
It can make people take physical action against people who identify as being transgender.
See, God is sexist, God is racist, and God is homophobic.
Okay.
So really the Bible is an illegal book today.
So you could either protect free speech or prosecute hate speech. Hate speech?
Yeah, free speech.
Free speech, eh?
Free
Well,
speech, man.
we're going to divide. How would you define hate speech?
Hate speech.
Now, normally I reveal my bias at the end, but this one is going to be pretty obvious which camp I fall into, so I'm just going to tell you up front. I'm a staunch supporter of protecting free speech, and my main argument for free speech is actually a question.
Who would you give the power to determine what is hate speech? Who would you want to give the power to decide what hate speech is?
That's another toughie.
Well, let me give you an example. Would you give Donald Trump the power to define what hate speech is?
I would not.
I'll just take a stab in the dark.
Okay.
Would you want Donald Trump to have the power to decide what is hate speech?
You don't want that.
You don't want that? Anthony Albanese, would you trust him to determine what is hate speech?
No.
Would you trust yourself with that power?
I don't know if I could trust myself with that.
Who would you give the power to determine what is hate speech?
I'd need to listen to some thoughtful legal experts.
Would you give yourself the power?
No.
You wouldn't trust yourself with
No.
the power to determine what hate speech is?
No.
So,
because I don't know what the legal definition is. I don't know what the legal ramifications are.
I could tell you.
Know. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to hold that for a sec? You know how to hold one of those?
Yeah. Yeah, here we go.
Thanks, man. So, I don't know if you know, but the hate crimes bill passed last month. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. I don't follow this stuff.
Well,
subscribe
to my channel.
I am actually.
Previously, the criminal code protected people based on race and religion, which I don't think it should have done in the first place. But now it's expanded to include sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, nationality, and political opinion. If someone posted on Twitter, Trump should be shot, urging violence over his political stance, and they were Australian, they'd be up for 5 years for incitement. Which brings me to major change 2 and 3, the lowered threshold for incitement and the subjective interpretation of threats. Before, incitement required clear intent to provoke force or violence. Now, the bill has replaced intending that force or violence occur with reckless as to whether it does, drastically lowering the burden of proof. Now, what counts as a threat is entirely subjective. A dad could rant about immigration, driving up housing costs, zero intent to incite violence, but if authorities decide his words were reckless to the possibility of violence, he could face 5 years in prison under section 80.2a. And here's something really important for you to know. The good faith defense is gone. Before, you could argue a comment was satire or debate under the good faith defense, present in previous versions of the criminal code. Now, they've removed that legal defense. So, if someone trained their pug to Nazi salute every time they said, "gas the Jews," meant as a joke, not a call to genocide, with no good faith defense, they're risking 5 years. Major change 5 is the threats against perceived associates of protected groups. The Hate Crimes Bill 2025 expands the scope of offences to include threats of violence against someone you believe is a close associate of a protected group. So, if you threaten me with "I'll smash you retard," though I've never been diagnosed with a disability, I could report you under 80.2bb, claiming you thought I was friends with disabled people. Crucially, it doesn't matter if I am. If the court accepts you believed it, that's 5 years in prison. If these laws sound crazy to you, then fact checks welcome, citations necessary. If you want to read it for yourself, then Hate Crimes Bill, Criminal Code, and the old Criminal Code are all down below. I suggest you use AI to help you out, or Control F 80.2, it'll take you right to where you want to go. But if you're realizing that we don't have free speech in Australia, that laws are subjective and enforcement depends on the cultural mood and the court's appetite for punishment, then you might want to vote for a party that actually defends free speech. If you think I'm fear-mongering and you trust the authorities to wield these powers without prejudice, then you could consider voting for one of these parties at the next election. But here's something worth knowing. The Libertarian Party proposed a First Amendment style free speech protection, and it would have passed if the Liberal Party hadn't stalled it. That's right, Labor and Liberal have voted against your right to free speech.
Okay, so I'll vote here.
Right in the middle.
Like that? You like that?
No, I don't like that.
Okay, here's why.
Okay.
This is the wrong question. I think when everyone's arguing about free speech versus hate speech, it's a difficult thing because when you prosecute hate speech, you crush certain free speech. Who gets to be the judge of certain scenarios, blah, blah, blah. That's why it's complicated. That's why it's divisive.
Yeah. Okay.
My preference would be you have to, in order to preserve free speech, you have to allow, some abhorrent sort of speech to occur in order to protect free speech. I lean free speech.
Yeah, it sounds like you're leaning on the free speech
I'd
side.
lean free speech, but I would say that this is the wrong question.
Okay.
Because everyone in both these groups, I believe, would agree on a step forward in the solution to this whole thing is that what you've got with like Facebook platforms, Meta, X, Elon Musk, they're all talking about free speech.
Yeah.
But I think that's a distraction
Okay.
from the real problem is what controls what we see in society. Algorithms, media, things like that, and who controls what we see and who controls the conversation online. So I wouldn't ever advocate for prosecuting someone for what they've said. I think it's a massive distraction. Like, lock him up, he didn't. What are these algorithms programming our society to do?
I don't want to get distracted by the algorithms. All right, so...
Well, that's my point. I'm trying to distract because I think that this conversation is the distraction. Because I'm saying
I think that's the distraction.
We should all unite over holding tech accountable.
Yeah.
And I'm not even saying ban stuff. I'm saying we should be able to see
Yeah.
what they're programming into their algorithms.
Okay, Punters Politics had a lot to say, and if you want to see the full unedited conversation, then just let me know. But I want to respond to 2 points that he made. First of all, a point of agreement. He just argued that tech companies should be transparent with their algorithms and we should be able to see what's written in them. I agree. Are they programmed to keep us engaged? Obviously. Does that involve outrage bait and thirst traps? Well, it depends. And this is my second point, a point of disagreement. My algorithm looks very different to my wife's because she doesn't click on the same things. And it's all well and good to say I want educational videos that enrich me intellectually, but these videos exist, and if you don't click on them, your algorithm won't suggest them to you.
Yeah, but who decides what pops up on my feed?
Well, your algorithm does.
Exactly, and who programmed that algorithm?
You did.
No, I didn't.
Oh, you don't think so?
No, I put inputs into it. They put a formula to it,
Yeah.
going, we want him to do X, Y, Z. We want him to stay on platform longer.
Yeah.
We want him to feel outraged. We want him to whatever.
So if the formula is pop up, show him whatever will keep him on the platform longest, do you think they've trained it or you've trained it?
Well, they've told it what parameters. Because if I was to tell the algorithm what I want, I want high quality information. I don't want to be outraged. I don't want clickbait. I don't want deceptive information.
But if you keep clicking on things that outrage you and keep you on there longer, isn't that revealed preference, that that's actually what you want to engage with?
Well, I would put it like this. You have I used to be a teacher. So you've got a toddler, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, what do you want to eat? The kid's like,
candy.
Lollies, candy.
Yeah.
Oh, candy, please, please, please. And oh, well, I'm just giving the kid what they want. No, it's child abuse. When I look at my feed, I don't want to look at cat videos, but I keep sending them to my wife and I don't want to look at it.
So Punters Politics is arguing that conversations about free speech are a distraction, and the more important conversation is who controls speech online. I disagree. Here is the full scope of everything you could talk about if you had free speech. And here is the topic of the day as the cultural conversation moves with the news. But if the government restricts the scope of acceptable speech, then these topics never get talked about openly. They move into the dark corners of society. And that's why I disagree with Punters Politics on this detail. And I think free speech is more important than who controls the conversation. Big tech companies definitely can and have put their thumb on the scale, but ultimately tech companies can't arrest you for talking about something they don't like. If you care about free speech, now is the time to act. Consider joining the Free Speech Union or supporting legal cases like Sal Grover's in Tickle v Giggle, a case that will determine not only what is a woman in law, but whether you can legally be forced to say things you don't believe. And if that sounds crazy, it's because it is. If you don't know about the most important court case in a decade, it's because the Australian media isn't reporting on it, but it has made headlines in the UK and America. You were born free.